Hello everyone, this is Lectors from World of Warships. Today I'm going to talk about two very important mechanics of the game in this video, angling and overmatching. Angling is a very useful way to reduce the damage taken when being shot by enemy AP shells. How does it work? There is a mechanic in the game called ricochet. It means when an AP shell hits the armor with a very flat angle, the shell will be bounced away and do no damage to your ship at all. There are two important thresholds, 30 degrees and 45 degrees. For most of the ships, if we measure the angle between the shell trajectory and the armor surface, and if the angle is smaller than 30 degrees, the AP shell will just bounce away and do no damage at all. If the angle increases to between 30 degrees and 45 degrees, the AP shell will have a chance to penetrate and deal penetration damage, which is usually a third of the shell's original damage. And if the angle keeps increasing to above 45 degrees, the AP shell will have no problem penetrating the armor, which means ricochet will not occur at all. The exceptions are all the Royal Navy cruisers, which have smaller threshold of 10 to 20 degrees for Tier 1 to Tier 5, and 15 and 30 degrees for Tier 6 to Tier 10. Other exceptions are US heavy cruisers, HMS Hood and HMS Duke of York. The ricochet chance starts at 30 degrees instead of 45 degrees. It guarantees at 22.5 degrees instead of 30 degrees. So angling just means put your ship in a small angle towards the enemy and try to bounce their AP shells with your armor. However, if the gun caliber is big enough, which means battleship guns, the AP shell will just punch through the armor regardless of any angling. This is called overmatch. There is a magic number, 14.3. If the gun caliber is more than 14.3 times bigger than the armor thickness value, overmatch happens. Let's take some typical battleship gun caliber, for example. For 356 mm on Fuso, New Mexico, and King George V, if we divide 356 by 14.3, it is 24.985, which means any armor thinner than 25 mm can be overmatched by these guns. The bigger one, the 380 and 381 mm that can be found on Bismarck, Richelieu, Alsace, and Warspite and Byron. The value after calculation is 26.643, which means any armor thinner than 27 mm can be overmatched by these guns. The bigger 406 mm guns can be found on Nagato, Colorado, North Carolina, Iowa, Missouri, Montana. After calculation, the value is 28.391, which means any armor thinner than 29 mm can be overmatched by these guns. One step bigger to 419 and 420 guns that can be found on Conqueror and Grosser Curvers and Friedrich the Grosser. The value after calculation is 29.370, which means any armor thinner than 30 mm can be overmatched by these guns. One step bigger, the 431 mm that can be found on Republic. After calculation, the number is 30.139, which means any armor thinner than 31 mm can be overmatched by the Republic's guns. One step bigger again, the 457 mm guns that can be installed on the Conqueror's upgraded guns. The value after calculation is 31.958, which means any armor thinner than 32 mm can be overmatched by these guns. And last, the biggest gun in the game, the 460, that are installed on Yamato and Musashi, they can overmatch any armor thinner than 33 millimeters. So, what kind of armor can these different guns overmatch? Let's take a look in the game. Now, let's go to the port and take a look at the armor values of some typical tier 10 ships. So let's start with cruisers. First of all, the Zhao. If we click here, armor layout, we can take a look at the armor profile of the ship. So in this video, I'm going to mainly talk about three specific sections of the armor. First is the bow, which means the nose of the ship, and then the stern, which is the back end of the ship, and the upper armor belt on the side of the ship. And first of all, the Zhao, you can see here both the bow and stern are covered in 25 millimeter armor, and then the upper belt is covered in 30 millimeter armor. And then the second ship, Des Moines. For Des Moines, the bow and stern and the upper armor belt are all 27 millimeters. And then for the Hindenburg has 27 millimeter for like the majority of the bow and the stern, but as you can see, there's a small 14 millimeter plating here. And also the main armor belt stretch all the way from the front turret to almost to the rudder here. And the upper belt in the middle is the same as Zhao in 30 millimeters. Well, Minotaur, this is an exception. We're not gonna take a look at it because its armor is just too thin. And also for the Soviet cruiser, the Moskva, they recently buffed the Moskva. So for the bow, the upper and lower sections of the bow are in 25 millimeters, but as you can see, the middle section of the bow is covered in 50 millimeter armor. This makes the Moskva extremely tanky when nose in, as I will demonstrate later in the test. And for the stern, the same story, 25 up and down and 50 in the middle. And also the upper belt is 50 millimeter as well. And for the French, the Henry IV, the whole bow is covered in 25 millimeter, and so the stern, yes. And for the upper armor belt, it's 30 millimeters, the same as Zhao and Hindenburg. So these, oh, I almost forgot about our new cruiser member, the Worcester. For the Worcester, it's 25 millimeter, 25 millimeter, and 25 millimeter all the way. So it's the second least protected cruiser at tier 10, just in front of the Minotaur. Okay, then we're gonna take a look at the battleships. Okay, first, the mighty Yamato. For tier 10 battleships or tier 8 and above battleships, 32 millimeter bow and stern are standard. And the upper belt of Yamato, it's also 32 millimeters. Then we move to Montana. You can see 32 and 32 standard. But this, the upper armor belt, is 38 millimeters, slightly more than the Yamato's 32. And the Republic, which is my favorite battleship at the moment, it has 32 millimeter everywhere all the way. And also, where's my, I'm absolutely blind. Oh, my Conqueror. It's not an elite ship because I haven't researched the second gun upgrade. So, for the Conqueror, it's 32 bow, 32 upper bow, and also 32 32 stern. And the one I don't have, which is the Grosser Curvest, which is Cuz favorite. It has 32 upper and lower sections, but here 60 millimeters. That covers the majority of the area of the bow, and even 120 millimeters back here. And the upper bow is 150 millimeters, which is the thickest among all Tier 10 battleships. At the back, it's same story, 32, and a big 120 millimeter plating here, covering a big area of the stern. After looking at all the Tier 10 ships' armor values, we can draw this table which contains all the Tier 10 ships' armor values. If we combine the two tables we draw together, we can have this table, which shows the ability of each Tier 10 battleship's guns overmatching other Tier 10 ships' armor. In this table, the value in every single box represents the armor thickness of a specific section of the ship listed on the very left side of the row, and the color of the box represents the overmatchability of the battleship guns listed at the top of the column. The green color means this battleship gun has no problem overmatching this particular section on the ship. Yellow color means this gun can overmatch some area of the particular section, and the red color means this gun cannot overmatch this section at all. If we take a closer look at this table, we can see the overmatchability of all these guns can be divided into three categories. The Yamato's 460 guns has the best overmatchability among all Tier 10 battleship guns. The Montanas, the Curvus, and the Conqueror's 419 guns have the worst overmatchability across the board. And thanks to the ability to overmatch 30mm armor, the Conqueror 457 guns and the Republic's 431 guns sit in the middle. Now let's bring all these theories into the gameplay. Pay attention to the detail ribbons appeared on the right side of the screen and see how many penetrations and how many ricochets. First, let's see how the Montana works. The first target is a Moskva. It has 50mm in the lower end of the bow, so my shots cannot overmatch it and do no damage. And the second shot on its upper section of the bow. This time, my shells can overmatch its bow armor and then do damage. For the upper armor belt, because it's still 50mm over there, so no chance at all. The next target is Henry IV. With 25mm bow, no problem overmatching it at all. But then it comes to the upper armor belt on the side, because it's 30mm, so my guns cannot overmatch it and cannot do any damage. And then it's the Hindenburg. I can overmatch its 27mm part of his bow and even got a citadel. But for the upper armor belt on the side, it's the same story as the Henry's. Then it comes to the Worcester. Being the second worst protected cruiser at Tier 10, it has 25mm armor all around the place, so I have no problem overmatching either his bow or his upper armor belt on the side. And then the same story happens to Des Moines. Although it has 27mm armor everywhere, which is 2mm more than the Worcester, it can only bounce the AP shells from the guns with the caliber of 381mm and below. And last comes the Zao, because it has 25mm on the bow and stern and 30mm on the upper armor belt on the side, so the story is similar to Hindenburg and Henry. I can overmatch its bow, but I can't overmatch its upper armor belt. And then it comes to shooting at battleships. Because battleships at tier 8 and above have 32mm armor on their bow and stern as standard, so the Montana cannot overmatch any one of them. The only exception would be this, because one single shell made contact with the very tip of the bow of the Republic, so the game sees it as no angling at all, so this shell could penetrate into Republic and deal damage. Now, let's switch to the Republic. The one step forward on the Republic and the 457 Conqueror is their ability to overmatch 30mm armor, which appears on Zhao, Hindenburg, and Henry IV. As you can see here, I no longer have problem overmatching the upper armor belt on the side of the Henry, Hindenburg, and the Zhao. But when facing the Moskva, I still cannot overmatch its upper armor belt on the side and the lower part of its bow. Now I want to pause the topic and talk about the Yamato. The Yamato has the highest citadel among all tier 10 battleships, and it's sort of in an octagon shape. So when you look at it from an angle from the front, it still provides a very flat surface. So if you can penetrate the 32mm armor on the outside, you can citadel Yamato easily from the front. All you need to do is to aim below the first turret, just like this. But the Yamato still has the biggest advantage over all other tier 10 battleships, which is its guns. With the ability to overmatch 32mm armor, the story is very different. The three ships covered in 32mm armor everywhere are Republic, Conqueror, and the Yamato itself. So now, I have no problem overmatching both the bow and the upper armor belt on the side on all these three ships in my Yamato. Also, the Montana only has 32mm on the bow, so I have no problem overmatching it. However, there are still places that I cannot overmatch. The first one is the Montana's upper belt on the side. Because it's 38mm, my AP shells just bounced away on the armor belt. The second one is the Moskva. Because of the existence of the 50mm plating on the bow, it can still bounce away some of my shells. Also, the 50mm upper belt can bounce away my shells as well. The ultimate protection comes from the Grosser Kurfürst. Due to the coverage of the 60 and 120mm armor on the bow, it's the toughest bow among all ships in the game. Also, I have no chance to overmatch its 150mm upper belt on the side at all. After explaining the theory and showing you the test in the game, I think you might already have an idea of how to protect yourself better. The first thing you need to do is to have a good idea about the armor of the ship you're playing and the gun caliber you're facing. It's just a couple of important thresholds. In terms of armor, you only need to remember 25, 27, 30, 32. In terms of gun caliber, there are 356, 381, 406, 431, and 460. Combine them together, you can find out the relationships between those two groups of numbers. If the enemy cannot overmatch your armor, just put that piece of armor in an angle of below 45 degrees or even below 30 degrees towards the enemy guns, and then you can bounce away their AP shells. If the enemy can overmatch your armor, maybe it's better to stay away and using your mobility to dodge shells to mitigate the damage. This is all for today's video. Hope you enjoy it and hope you learn something new from it. And I'll see you next time.